Holy Happy Hour Batman. I am Father Ben. I'm an Episcopal priest and co-founder of the All Ports Open Network and Apon Games. On this show, Holy Happy Hour Batman, I am joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk all about life, faith, spirituality, game design, philosophy, and whatever else comes up here in the show. Tonight we have a really exciting guest. I'm really honestly thrilled to be doing this show tonight, folks. I'm very thankful because we had tried to book tonight's guest for a long time, all year basically, and we had some scheduling difficulties. But tonight, award-winning game designer Whitney Delaglio is coming on the show to talk about Prism, about providing a space. I did it. I keep doing that. A safe space for intimacy and emotional vulnerability in gaming, and just generally all her work in ttrpgs. I'm very excited about it. I'm glad that she's going to be here in just a moment, and I'd love to see your questions tonight during the show in the chat. So we'll do our best to get to them during the show. Just drop your questions in the chat, and we'd love to have you join our conversation we're about to have. But before we get into this episode, we have some announcements, some news, some housekeeping as always here on Holy Happy Hour. We recently at All Ports Open Network launched Apon Games, our analog game production arm of the All Ports Open Network. If you go to apongames.com, you can see our beautiful new website for it, and you can sign up to get updates from Apon Games to their email. And if you do, you'll also get a 10% off coupon for our brand new campaign setting. It's a cyberpunk themed system agnostic campaign setting called New Korai City. You can get 10% off the Jumpstart Guide if you give us the email to get updates from Apon Games about everything we have going on at Apon Games. New Korai City is really cool. It's written by J.W.G. Wise, who wrote our game The Hard Lessons and wrote the audio drama Weeping Cedars. And so if you want to get updates from Apon Games, go to apongames.com. Check out New Korai City. If you want to check it out before you go all in, you can get the free version of the Jumpstart Guide at patreon.com/allportsopen. We're going to be doing a Patreon release model for NKC for that campaign setting. For people who back more than $5 a month will get monthly updates leading up to an adventure. So it's pretty cool what we're doing with New Korai City with that cyberpunk campaign setting, and I hope you'll check it out. You also might know, viewers, that my game that I wrote, Broken, a tragic romance game, is crowdfunding right now as we speak. Now, if you're here tonight because Whitney's our guest and you want to hear about romance, relationships in TTRPGs, intimacy, all those kinds of things, Broken is a tragic romance game for 2 players, and we are crowdfunding that right now with an itchfunding model. So you can check that out at bit.ly/brokengame. We are less than $150 now from fully funding the stretch goal, which I'm really excited about. We're going to be funding a set of scenarios written by game designers. And so, we would love to hit that goal. There's also 3 reward levels left, 3 left, where you can pay to play a custom game with me, the game's creator. So if you want to do that, make sure you go visit the campaign page and scroll all the way down to the bottom to do that. So like I said, we're less than $150 away from that stretch goal. And so I'm really excited about that. So I hope folks will check that out. That's bit.ly/brokengames. You can find all of our Apon Games on itch by going to apongames.itch.io. Okay, so it is happy hour, and that means we have our cocktail for the week up on the screen. And so you can see this is the, as I called it, the Purple Prism. It is inspired by Whitney's game, Prism. I wanted to do something kind of, my first thought for this cocktail was, all right, can I find a way to do something prismatic with this cocktail? Is there a way to do that? And so I read up a bunch about using this edible luster dust. It sounds crazy maybe to you, but it's like, if you've ever seen, there was a I'm spacing on the name of it, but there was actually a like shimmery cocktail you could buy for a while. They actually stopped making that cocktail. But if you've ever seen like a cocktail that looks like it's shimmery, like it like moves and shimmers, like when you shake it, it's actually edible luster dust that is in those drinks. And you can buy that for yourself to make your own like shimmery cocktails, and it produces a really cool effect. So what I did was I did 2 things. This is kind of a holy happy hour first. I created my own homemade liqueur as the basis for this drink. And then I created the cocktail, the Purple Prism. So there's kind of 2 recipes in one here on the screen. There's the Purple Prism liqueur recipe, and then there's the actual cocktail ingredients. For the liqueur, you're going to want to like take like a small bottle, something you can close or plug up. I guess it could also be like a mason jar. But if you like, what I like to do for these is old syrup bottles from your cocktail syrups or old liquor bottles. You can actually, like, if you have like a cork or something or just a lid, I like to keep those, wash them out, and then reuse them for homemade stuff like this. So basically, you can take half a cup of the liqueur Hypnotique. It's like a blue liqueur you can buy at the store, like at your local liquor store, wherever you buy alcohol beverages. So it's half a cup of Hypnotique, a quarter cup of Crème de Violet, which is a French liqueur. Crème de Violet, it's purple. And 2 tablespoons of blackberry syrup, and then 1 teaspoon. Start really, really small with the that edible luster dust, and you can buy it in different colors. So for this, you're going to want to use purple. You could decide to like throw a couple different I don't know what it would do. You could try to throw a couple different colors in, and you can see what that. I don't know if that actually will make it prismatic or not. So it might just make it look like a mess. I have no idea, but it won't hurt you. But you want to start with like a tiny amount of the luster dust, and then like add more in to get the desired level of shimmer that you want. But you're going to want to pre-make that that liqueur into like a bottle and set it aside. And then for your actual cocktail, it's 2 ounces of gin, an ounce of that Purple Prism liqueur, 3/4 ounces of fresh lemon juice, and you're just going to put that in a shaker with ice. Shake it really, really good. Kind of give it like not like actually a strain. Don't use a strainer because you know you got that luster dust in it. You want it to have that shimmer effect, but just kind of like a partial strain pour, just to like so that the ice doesn't go out, and serve it in like a martini glass or otherwise serve it up. Yeah, that's the drink, the Purple Prism. It should be really shimmery and beautiful and purple. And that's the cocktail. It's also delicious because this is kind of one of my variations on the Aviator cocktail, which is a classic cocktail. It's a classic gin drink and really good. And so if you like flavors of like blackberry and trying to think like if you like rose flavor, blackberry flavor stuff, I think the Hypnotique is like a blend of flavors. I think mango is in there somewhere, which maybe is a little weird, but this is good. So definitely check it out. Give it a try, and if you do, don't forget, tag me, let me know that you've given the cocktail of the week a try. And yeah, so that's the Purple Prism, inspired by Whitney's game Prism, which we're going to talk about basically now. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring Whitney on the show. Whitney, welcome to Holy Happy Hour, Batman. After all of this time, welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for making the time to come on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So now I was talking to Whitney, for our viewers who don't know, I was talking to Whitney before the show, and I was talking as if she knew what I was talking about with the cocktail, even though she had not seen me give that spiel I just gave yet. So like, she had no idea what I was talking about. So now that you've seen me introduce the recipe, I don't know, what do you think? Does it sound good? What do you think of gin drinks? Or does it sound...
Oh no, I like gin. So, and I like shimmery things. Like a friend of mine in Canada actually got me mermaid tear vodka, which has that luster in it.
Okay.
But I haven't, cons and COVID, so eventually I'll get that bottle. And I actually recently got my sister a beer that has that luster dust in it. So it's
Cool.
it's still making waves here and there. But yeah, I'm glittery. I like the color purple now, thanks to Prism, because I used to not like the color purple. I'm not sure about Hypnotic, but the last time I had it was when I was a young drinker, and I didn't really have a palate, like a taste for it yet. So I'd have to try that again. But I wouldn't mind trying it. Yeah.
It's funny because this is now like the second or third cocktail for the show I've used that in, and I was super skeptical of that cocktail, that liqueur also, because like it just like. It's not marketed to. I don't think it's marketed to me. I don't think I'm the target market for that liqueur. It's fine, but here's like I like using it. Where it's grown on me is like there are some cocktails it's actually pretty good for. That's what I've learned, making drinks with it. So like as a mix-in, like it's actually pretty good. But then you have to have it around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you have to buy one and then only use it and then keep it for like a couple of years sitting on your shelf.
Well, when I had it, it was like early 2000s, and I think it was like really like hip in the rave scene or something like that. And you're supposed to get it with like a glow stick. So I'm like, oh, hell yeah! And so I go to a bar. I'm like, I want a hypnotic martini with one of those glow sticks. They're like, oh, sorry, we're all out of glow sticks, but they made the cocktail anyway. I'm like, then what's the point? It's table flip.
That's amazing. That's so funny. Wow. Like I said, it is definitely not I am not the target demographic that they tried to market that liqueur to. So I didn't even know like it had that history. I don't know. I think like I just saw it on the shelf for a long time at the liquor store. Never used it, and then saw some recipes online for cocktails that use it, and I was like, really? You don't say. So I tried it for myself, and like I'm like, okay, yeah, as like a mix-in liqueur, like it's not bad for sure. And if you want, the other thing is because I'm making recipes for the show every week, I'm like always looking for color variations, and so I often end up using it for that.
It's blue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I haven't actually worked much with the luster powder, and like I think it's a cool thing that if you want to like impress people with. Obviously, if you're just making a drink on a Monday night by yourself, you're probably not going to break out the luster dust.
Yeah.
But like, you know, if you're like looking to impress some people, I did see when I was doing research for this episode and for this cocktail, I saw some like really crazy stuff. There was like I don't remember what it was even called. There was like multicolored like sparkles that you can put in cocktails and they're edible, or like cocktails like sprinkles they make for cocktails and stuff. And I was like, that's too far out there for it's too far out there. But then I settled on the that luster stuff. So yeah, so it's a very shimmery. Well, the thing I didn't say when I was pitching the cocktail too is I thought the shimmer made me think of aquatic. So that was the other reason why I thought it was appropriate for Prism.
Yeah.
Was like having that shit that just made me. At least that's what my brain did. So anyway, like I said, welcome to the show. We've done our obligatory cocktail chatter here at the start. Yeah, so if people don't know you at all out there, other than like what they've heard just now, what's a quick pitch as to who you are and what you do as far as like ttrpgs and stuff, and in life in general, I guess.
I'm Whitney. My pronouns are she, her, and bro. I've been in the tabletop scene since around 2014. Before that, I was playing D&D, but that was about it. And I wasn't really in the community quite yet. I published my first game in 2018, which is Prism. Since then, I've drawn for games, I've written for games, and right now I'm working on, and I have one of them, and then I've published some other games like Tiny Tusks, which is a half-orc game that's supposed to make biracial nerds feel more happy, to give biracial nerds a bit more happiness in their lives. And I'm currently working on a hack of the game Lady Blackbird, called the Cold, the Old, the Old, the Cold, the Bold. I remember the game name, my own game, which is kind of like a criminal gig economy. So it's like crimes on an app, but there's like a company brand, so there are safety mechanics like woven in, because cool. you can't do certain crimes or actions because it's bad for PR.
I love that. That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah. So we'll kind of get into all of that and like Prism, and you also wrote for Thirsty Sword Lesbians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can try to get into all that stuff in a minute, but let's maybe talk, like, kind of backtrack. You said you started with D&D.
Yeah, 3.5.
Gotcha. Yeah, and how did you end up finding, like, what's your TTRPG origin story? Like, how did you end up playing and getting involved in playing?
So back in college in the early 2000s, I knew people who played D&D, but none of them were in my social circle. So I was like, oh yeah, that game where you roll dice and play characters and have hit points, that's cool. But then I met a group of guys through a mutual friend, and we were playing just board games at first, like Seventh Wonders and Catan and stuff like that. And then they were like, hey, one of my friend's boyfriend wants to run D&D, so let's all, let's play it. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. This will be my chance to finally try this game out, see what the hubbub is about. So I built I had no idea what I was doing, because I had no prior experience. So I just did what I was told to. I was like, I want to be like a religious person. They're like, okay, we're gonna have you be a human because that's easy, and a paladin, and you're gonna have a morning star because that's good against the undead. And I'm like, because you like because of turn undead and smite and stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And it was nice because that was back in the day when people could we could game like weekly. So while I didn't exactly 100% enjoy D&D, it was just nice to like have something to look forward to once a week. And I don't remember how far we got, but I've never finished a D&D campaign. Fun fact. So it would like fizzle out, or like the dungeon master would be like, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, or they would move to New York.
I wish there was like data on how many D&D campaigns actually ever reach any kind of satisfying conclusion, or they just fizzle out.
Mm-hmm. And but yeah, it was fun being that character, and I enjoyed that a lot. And that was around towards the tail end of me playing D&D, being like, I'm kind of tired of D&D. I got introduced to Google Plus by someone in the community at a gaming panel thing at a college, and I was like, I'm Whitney, here's a picture of my paladin, she's a blackguard now because she fell in love with the blackguard, I'm Whitney. And people were like, hi, we like your artwork, you want to here's some fun games that are like easy for beginners in any community. So I was like playing like Powered by the Apocalypse games and Lady Blackbird and things like that. And in 2014, I went to my first Metatopia.
Cool.
And it was just uphill from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So usually I do end up kind of asking, you're kind of getting into it already, but that question of like how you transition from playing RPGs to writing. Yeah. So was it just going what exactly did that transition look like for you, and like when did you start seeing yourself as a game designer?
So in college, I had an idea that was originally a comic book, because that's what I went to college for, and I was like, I should have gone to art school for comic books, but I didn't know what I was doing back then. So I had an idea. I'm like, I want like a story that's kind of like a JRPG that has like multiple gods in it. And I know that back then I didn't know what the term was called, polytheism. The internet was still kind of sort of a baby. Like Wikipedia was like, boop. But anyway, so, and then I was like, I want this to be a video game. And of course, and then that's why I went to that gaming panel, because it was about video games. And I was like, how hard could that be? And then I like saw other people working on games, and I was like, this is very hard and I don't want to do this. But I had the idea, my idea was more solidified by then. So I was like, okay, I'm going to like use my art school background and make a web comic, so that way I can at least, iron out the plot line of the video game. So if it ever does happen, I'll be ready. But then like, I was like, doing comic books, it was too hard. Cause I wanted every panel to be perfect. And then, you want to make sure you're submitting a comic, a page on a regular. And I was like, so video game wasn't working out. And then the comic book for the video game wasn't really working out. And then someone coming up to me like, hey, why don't you make it like a role-playing game? And I was like, and that was before I started playing role-playing games. And I was like, how hard could that be? And I was like, oh my God, I would regret those words more than trying to make it into a video game, because it was at least a video game. I knew at the beginning that like, no, that's too much of a bite to chew. So I started working on making Prism into a tabletop game, but that was like when D&D was my only like thing on my character sheet. So I was like, this is really crunchy. So like Prism was really crunchy at first, because that was my only experience with role-playing games. And I also didn't have the concept in my head of what I want a game to do. I just had the idea for the game, like, and what the story should be about. But back then it wasn't about like relationships and lighthearted adventures occasionally and the undead. And then I started playing, when I started playing the indie games and LARPs, actually, like Lumberjills, I was like, I was like picking out all these things that I want in a game that I don't want in a game. And that started influencing Prism until it became its anime, my final form. Yeah. And then recently I had to do a second print run because IPR was all out of copies. So it was not really second edition because the player experience is still the same, but I like touched up some of the examples, I clarified some things, and I changed some descriptions. Like I changed the description for some of the character types because I was like, I don't like the wording I used. I could do better.
Yeah.
And so I have that now, which is exciting.
Oh, we get to see a copy. Do you mind holding it up again for a little longer? Show people. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, there's some artwork.
Yeah.
Artwork.
Did you do all of the artwork yourself in the book?
I did all the artwork except the almanac in the back because my bestie, who's doing artwork for the Lady Blackbird hack, I wanted her to do it, so she did the almanac because I thought it was important to have examples of how to do things in the game.
Yeah.
Because I came to realize even now that like difficulty synonyms are like kind of meaningless in my head if I don't have context. So like, what's the difference between simple and difficult? I mean, I know what that means, but like, what does that mean? Like compared to do one thing to a harder version of that thing.
Yeah.
So like convincing your friend to share your cookie, that's simple. Convincing a stranger to share their cookie, that's a little more. That's a bad example, but that was the first thing that came to mind because I had a really big cookie today, and I was like, I love cookies.
But it's really interesting to me that, like, you know, the way you described that process was to me like your own way of understanding terms and rules influenced the way that you then write it in the book or lay the rules out in the book for people, that's fascinating, right? Like, it's interesting how we process. I don't know. It's just really interesting to me when I hear, like, I get to interview game designers all the time. So kind of getting everyone's process, you know, is a little bit different. So like hearing you like lay it out that way, it's very clear that it's like, okay, because like you need to read rules a certain way. And then maybe that's the way it works for all of us when we're writing rules. We like write them out, at least first pass wise, like we write them as if we're telling ourselves how to play. Because I think that's kind of how I write rules too. Like, maybe I don't know any other way to do it. I don't know. I haven't thought about this before. But I don't know. What do you think? Like,
Well, Prism was definitely me writing like basically it's the quote unquote making a game I want to play kind of thing. So it's very like do whatever you want in this context. So like spell casting, it's like here are the difficulty levels, here are the elements you can use. Do what you want. I don't care. I like say it's basically Prism. It's like its slogan should be I like saying yes. I don't like telling players no.
I have the same instinct. I'm exactly that way. Yeah.
So a friend of mine, Michael Addison, said it best, where it's like Prism's kind of like a box of toys, and there's like each toy is like a different mechanic, like initiative, emotional pain, learning experience. And you can just pick and choose which ones you want to use and be like, I don't want to worry about like hit points today. So we're just going to tell a story and like hand wave anyone getting an ouchie boo boo and just say like, oh man, they hurt your feelings. So just make note of that. Or like, okay, we're going to focus real hard on blessing and curses today and everything else I don't care about. But the hack I'm working on, it's more writing a game for someone who isn't necessarily me, because most of the people I game with often are kind of like me. Big surprise, where it's like they don't need like a bullet note of lists of like options. We're like, lore, let's just hand wave this. That mechanic's not important because we're having fun and we're just gonna do whatever the fuck we want. There's not a rule saying you get more dice, but I'm saying you do have 3 dice. I don't care, but I realize that not everyone is like that, and especially since it's based off a game that's so like wonderfully like good for like first timers / people just meeting for the first time at a con. I didn't want to make it super complicated, so it's just kind of like I gotta make this game for people that need structure. So like at first it was built like a game that I could run like on a like hungover on 5 hours of sleep. But then I slowly started putting in stuff for people who need more structure. Like, here are a bunch of questions you can ask the players. Here's a bunch of questions you can ask yourself. Here are some tips to how to run the game. So but it's interesting though, because like it's helpful to me sometimes, and people I play it with, because it gets the questions and tips kind of like get your brain going in directions that you might not have thought of, which is why a lot of times when I include questions, I try and make them as broad as possible, because I feel like if they're like really deep, like what's the word?
Or like specific or narrow.
Yeah, specific questions. It sounds more like you have to answer it more than like if it's a broad question. It's like you could like, oh, like one of the questions is, you know, would you work with this team again, as opposed to is there anything left unsaid or unspoken? Because that implies like, oh, does that mean we're not supposed to like each other, or you're supposed to be like, oh man, you stole more jewelry than me and I didn't like that. But like working with this team again, it's more like, oh yeah, especially that one because we really hit it off. Or no, I think I'm kind of done with this app. This was kind of scary and I'm obviously out of my league. So I don't know. I kind of like lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. Well, no, it sounds like I think you and I have similar GM and like design instincts actually. But I'm curious, like it's interesting, like you talk about Prism, like you talk about sensuality and relationships, conflict resolution. Those are like, or like making the gaming space is, you know, safe space for intimacy and emotional vulnerability. That's like, that's I don't know, let's see, what's the way to put it? I was gonna say that's like, that's pretty I don't know if it's fair to say that that's niche exactly in indie TTRPGs, but it's
not anymore,
like,
anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like it certainly was, right? Like I got more and more involved in TTRPGs around the same time period as you were, and so like, you know, you remember what it was like back then versus now, so it's just completely different. But like, so maybe niche isn't exactly the right word, but it's certainly like not most people's. If we assume most people in TTRPG hobby as like players and like just people who play whatever, D&D is like largely their experience, right? Mm-hmm. That stuff is like, you know, kind of off to one, not off to the side, but I'm not framing this question well. I feel like, but what I'm trying to say is like, that's a really interesting avenue for exploring TTRPGs, and I'm curious like where you like kind of got pulled into that mindset. Like how did you first get were there like games that introduced you to like including like relationships and stuff in role-playing games, or was it just like your own interest in that kind of pulled it into your design work? Like how did that aspect get like come into your design work?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like an inside joke with my social circle that I like being in relationships in games, particularly romantic ones.
Yeah. Not
so much anymore, at least, or I try not to do it as much. Like, let's just be platonic, because I don't want to like seem like I'm an addict looking for a hit. But yeah, D&D actually sort of introduced me into it, because I got into a relationship with the NPC in the game. But it was definitely getting into the indie games. Not quite at first, but like, so it was more like, you know, like testing the waters. Like I was like, my character was like married in a session of Dungeon World, and that was cool. But it was more when I was playing games, like, again, I'm bringing back LARPs again. Like I was playing like Lumberjills and Where's My Power Button, and it introduced me to big fields games. And like I'm a lunatic because I'm a very feely person. Like this is probably in the triad of Whitney. Little Whitney is very feely. Like I cry very easily when I'm excited. You can hear me across the room.
Yeah.
Or when I'm angry.
Yeah.
So I like having big feels, but there is a a LARP where I did not know what bleed was at the time, where I
Yeah.
felt a lot of bleed and it was bad. And I think that was my first example of what I don't want in a game. It's like, I want big feels, but I don't want to feel miserable afterwards.
Interesting.
Because that's, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know some people don't mind that
Yeah.
and like it, but I'm like, it's not my bag.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want Prism I want you to have feels in Prism, but I don't want you to feel miserable afterwards, because that's not what I would want.
Yeah. So how do you try to design that way so that like you can give the space for big feels but not leaving someone feeling miserable afterward?
Well, unfortunately, I did not actually mention debriefs in Prism, but it's more so what I more focused on was the beginning, which is now most people refer to as session zero, but I called it a tea party because a friend of mine was like, oh, the tone of your game sounds like some person enjoying a cup of tea. I'm like, oh, genius. So anyway,
I love that tea
and
party. That's great.
tea party, session zero, like let's talk, because a thing that I think is important to talk about during session zero is player expectation, because like I was back when I was play testing it, someone came up to me like, Whitney, I want to have sex in your game, and I was like, okay, we'll make that happen. And I was like, but that's important because it's like whenever I run a game, I try and like ask the players, like, is there anything you really want to do or want happen in this game today? And people might be like, you know what, I don't really want a really intense game today, can we like just be on a lighthearted adventure, like, oh, let's talk about ghosts, let's do that. And then there's like one time where I had a really good moment with a friend where I was playing running it one-on-one, and I was like, okay, this is kind of a spoiler, but like, can my character like actually be a ghost at the end? And because I asked ahead of time, because you wouldn't want to drop that on somebody like without their consent. And then they said yes, and then it being like a really pretty moment, like, oh yeah, my character has actually been dead a while, but they wanted to make sure their partner was okay before moving on. And another thing I focus on in Prism and what I'm working on now is not quite player check-ins, but like keeping the gameplay like not a negotiation, but just like constantly just talking, because I feel like that's kind of like a good like passive check-in, because I like mentioned the X card, and I know people's opinions on the X card is like it varies, but whether you use it or not, I feel like it's a good visual cue. Like, this card on the table means that the players are more important than the game, and
Yeah.
that negotiations come before anything that happens in the game,
Yeah.
because the players come first.
Yeah.
So everyone can have a pleasant experience.
Yeah. That's a really good way of framing it. I had never quite heard or thought of in terms of like the X card, even like just existing, has its own power and like tone setting, right? And like intention setting. So like even just having it on the table is that's a good on its own on its own. We've been talking about safety tools because I've been in production for my game Broken, which is also I'm a romance. You're hitting all my notes because I'm a romance ttrpg designer, and like it's amazing to me how like when I asked you about like getting interested in that, you were like, your answer was my go-to answer, which is like I always ended up being in relationships in my D&D games and in my TTRPGs, and everyone kind of made jokes about how like that's what I always did, and so it's not a surprise I ended up designing that way also, I guess. But anyway, safety tools. We've been talking about safety tools a lot because we're like putting them into Broken, and Bo Sheldon is my safety consultant and safety designer for the game, and we're gonna like weave script change tools into the game, but in the version that's out there right now, uses the X card and talks about the X card, and I think the X card won't end up being the safety tool in the final version because like it is it's just probably not the best game tool for that particular game as far as like kind of the abruptness at which it like kind of removes you from the game like when you use it, which is not bad. I don't it's not a criticism of the X card because it's a great safety tool. But I had never thought of it that way, like the way you articulate it, which is like even just having it out on the table, like is a reminder that the people are more important than the game. Or I forget if that's how you phrased it. You said something like that. The people are more important. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have definitely slipped up as a game designer, but yeah, it's my intent to try to like always create a safe space. But like with the old, the cold, the bold, I don't necessarily mention a safety tool. I just basically wove safety into the game mechanics and said like, okay, if you're going to have anyone die, you have to ask first. If you're going to betray anybody, you got to ask first. It's like, again, it's like player X. It's like, what do you want from the game? So we know that. So if anything crazy happens, we're like, okay, she wanted that to happen and we said it was okay. So or like just pause and go, okay, is it okay if I do this, guys or folks?
Yeah.
And then have it happen, because I want to avoid slip ups I've made in the past by like making sure like anything drastic is okay before doing it.
So I think that's what we're trying to do too with Broken, is like weave the safety tools into the rules of the game. That's really one. I don't know how folks it'd be interesting. I had never thought about that quite yet. I hadn't made those mental steps to think like, oh, I wonder how people feel about that from a design standpoint. Like, I personally, I like the idea of weaving the safety right into the rules, so it's like not even necessarily this thing where it's like, okay, and now we're going to cover safety tools.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe there's some of that, but like, I like the idea that it's just kind of woven right into the rules, so that like that's just a part of this game. Like, it's just the same as any other rule in the game. It's just one more rule, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because with Prism, I made it like more like a conversation, because I didn't want to sound like I was stepping on a soapbox and being like, listen here, gamer, because like there's a box in the game where it's like, hey, being queer, gender norms, stuff like that, it's not a big, that does not happen in Prism. So don't make that a subject matter. No one's a homophobe, no one's a transphobe. If you identify as a male and you want to wear a dress, that's great. Prism does not care. But like with and like with Tiny Tusks, it was like, yes, there's a lot of toxic stuff about orcs. Leave that at the door. Don't come inside unless you're willing to leave that at the door, because it's supposed to be about half orcs. There's no unconsensual sex. There's no orcs hating their babies and their other half hating their babies. No, that's not what this game is about. And like with Old Cold Bold, it's like it starts with a letter from the CEO, like basically like, here are the ground rules you have to follow or I'm going to kill you. And it's like, no sexual violence, that's bad for PR. No crimes that involve like bombings or mass shootings. No violence in places of worship or medical facilities. So it's just kind of like it's weaving it into the game by making it part of the narrative, because it's kind of like the Assassin's Guild or the Thieves Guild and Terry Pratchett, where it's like, this stuff is regulated, but we want to keep that way, so don't fuck it up by being an asshole. Because I feel like, because that's the thing, like when you're making a game where people are like sort of doing shady shit, you don't want to like fly off the handle. Because I remember like the first and only time I played Blades in the Dark, which was great. And I met one of the people I love the most. I haven't seen them since the pandemic, where the X card was not present. There was a person being a shithead like the entire time. I was like, I want to murder them so badly. And it like happened in 3.5 a couple of times too, or it's like, stop being a dick, you're ruining it for the rest of it. Because it's like, if they and most of the time it was with D&D was in character, but like with Blaze Dark was like out of character. And it's just like, I can't have that in a game. If I'm trying to write a game where you're doing crimes, I can't have. I'm trying to like limit the amount of power a shithead has playing this game. I mean, granted, they might not even be playing it, but it's just again. So it's to let the players know, it's like, I'm gonna be playing a game where I'm a criminal, but hopefully nothing too scary or too like uncomfortable will happen.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It made me think of conversations we used to have around playing like when we did like video games, we did some podcasts for video games, and we used to like bring this up, talking about some of the like open world video games where you end up doing crimes like as part of the game. So like a Grand Theft Auto or something, you can do some crazy stuff in Grand Theft Auto, and the question of like who's like, should that stuff not be available to you as a player in the game? Should it be available to you as a player in the game? And that's a really interesting question. But then when you go to like RPGs, right, like suddenly you're not the only person at the table. Like in GTA, if I'm playing GTA at home by myself, it's kind of between me, the video game, and my God, as to like what I do in the game. I mean, assuming I'm not streaming it or something. But like with ttrpgs, like it's really interesting, the thought experiment to me of like, we're here to play a game involving crimes, navigating like the dynamic of like setting lines and veils, or like saying like what just deplorable actions we don't want to have come up in the game while we're intentionally choosing to do other deplorable actions. So that's a really fascinating thing to navigate. That's not really a question, but I don't know. It's interesting. Do you think that some stuff should be taken off the table, not necessarily by the people playing, but even like by the designer or out the game?
Well, I took out stuff that was just basically like default in my lines and just started from there.
Yeah.
Because it was easier in Prism, because the Prism, I wrote that like as a game for like the people that would play that game. So someone who wants a game where you're not really rolling dice, there's not a lot. There's you can take mechanics or leave them behind. You just want to be like aquatic folk having adventures. You want to focus on your relationship. So like the what's off the table wasn't as important, except for the things I mentioned earlier, like no homophobia or sexism.
Yeah.
Because it's like the people that I'm avoiding wouldn't be playing Prism. It's basically people who be like, I like dolphins, I like being in relationships, I like stuff about or they might like stuff about deities. They might just want to they want to play a game where they're underwater, because that's another reason why I wrote Prism, and I forgot to mention this. I was in a Pathfinder campaign, and I was like, can I be the mermaid character? And they're like, no, because we're going to be on the land. And I was like, you're not my dad. So it's like, that just made me want to write an underwater game even more, because I was like, I want to play a game where I can be a mermaid or merperson whenever I want to.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I don't think I've ever played an aquatic adventure before. It's such an interesting setting to like play underwater. Like that's like one of the top reasons why I want to get a chance to actually play Prism, is because like the idea of playing in an aquatic setting is so fascinating, because I've just never done it.
Well, it's interesting because like a friend of mine was running it for me as a play test, and they were like, "Oh, we don't have technology. They use fish in a bottle as like their messaging thing." So the way they ran it was kind of like underwater Flintstones. And a thing I wrote into the game, inspired by Echo the Dolphin, the Sega Genesis game. I was like, you can't drown. Everyone, because I originally had like air mechanics, and I was like,
sure.
why am I doing this? I hate, I love / hate Echo the Dolphin. So I'm like, everyone's an amphibian. You can't drown. So I was like, I don't want air mechanics. It's like, if you want to be underwater the entire time, don't worry about breathing.
That would be a very crunchy game if you had to worry about like air mechanics like while you're doing it. Yeah. I love the realization that you can like, oh, I could just not have that. I could just, like,
no, I don't want that.
We're just not doing that in this. Well, we also, so speaking of things we kind of jumped over real quick, but like you kind of mentioned it again just now, which is religion in Prism. Kind of tell us a little bit. You mentioned it, but dig into a little bit more the idea of like the idea of like pantheism or pantheism, polytheism. See, here I'm getting my theisms confused. How did that come up for you and as like an impetus to the game?
Well, I had like the artwork drawn for a while, and that wasn't included in the game because I was like, it's up to interpretation. I don't care. where and it just became there was more originally, but then I was like, I'm just gonna have it be Roy G V because I didn't include Indigo because uh so and that was another way to kind of like work some mechanics into by adding lore, because there's six deities in the game and they both rule over an island in the game except for one which rules over the ocean, which is the god of the sea. And depending on which realm you're from, which you have a code of ethics you follow by. So it like kind of tells the players, if I'm from here, I'll probably act like this. So like if you're from the Rouge realm, which is looked after by the goddess of blood, it's like non-toxic bro culture. It's like party all day, party all night, drink a lot, make sure you hydrate. Your feelings are valid, bro. Yada yada yada.
I love the phrase "non-toxic bro culture."
Non-toxic
It's like that's the best. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't again. This was like a subconscious thing. I was like, this is literally a game to be like about non-toxic bro culture. But anyway, and then, but if you're like from the green realm, which is watched over by the goddess of the forest, it's like very small social circle. Strangers don't matter to you. Decorum and family comes first. Feelings come second. And yeah, so that was basically my feelings. It's like I want like to give players an idea of like what their characters will be like while introducing people to watch over them. But I like made sure that I made sure to like mention that like they're not like conniving or anything or like constantly getting laid. They're just like and they don't have to exist if you want to. So if you again, it's like it's a toy in a box. I'm like, I really want to focus on the deities. Like, no, they're just gonna be in the background doing their own thing. But then there's someone's like, oh, I want Whitney. I want there definitely to be a deity interaction. I want them to like react to what I'm doing, or I want to talk to them. Or in the epilogue, we find out like like the ice cream man was the god of the moon all along. So yeah.
So do you? I'm just curious. It's so funny because I was like when we were prepping for the show, when Whitney and I were prepping for the show to our audience, that I was like, yeah, maybe we'll get into religion. Now here we are talking about religion. It's just kind of like it happens sometimes here on the show where it's one of our themes. But yeah, I'm just curious whether did you have like a religious background, like what drew you to want to like include that idea of multiple gods in yours? Was there anything from your own real life experience that kind of I don't know, drew that out?
No, I wasn't really religious. Like my parents tried to be when I was a kid, but it kind of like and
hey, just if you don't mind, feel free to like not want to talk about any of this, but I'm just curious what it means that they tried to be in. Like what did that look like?
I like did my first communion and went to church on Sundays for a bit, but then it was kind of like and I was like, that's fine by me because I don't like go. I feel like I feel like whenever I go into a church now, I'm gonna burst into flames. And I swear, the last time I went and we are supposed to do the peace be with you thing, like no one wanted to shake my hand. Like I understand, I understand because I don't want to be here either.
That's terrible.
But the reason why I added the deities actually because of sort of because of Final Fantasy IX, or me just want because basically before it was about a code of ethics per realm. It was like I was really interested in elementals, like the black mage stuff, and the music of Final Fantasy IX like made me think of like different elemental dances, which is why the spellcasters in the game use that as one of my friends called the Disney princess skill. So you cast spells by doing a performance like opera singing or ballet or playing an instrument. So at first the deities were like, okay, this is the deity of the forest, this is the deity of fire, this is the deity of water, and then like giving them a code of ethics, because I wanted to have like a like a boop on the nose and a shame on you mechanic built in, and so them being sort of elemental became first, and then them having a code of ethics came second.
Cool. I was just curious, yeah, if that like came out of your own background at all. But that's so funny that you describe it that way because it just made me think. And I wanted to say, oh yeah, I have parishioners like that, but then I was like, maybe I shouldn't say that on stream. But here I decided to say it, so we just did it. But yeah, that's cool. No, I was just genuinely curious about whether that had any background for you, like religiously, that kind of came out, But yeah, so kind of pivoting, shifting gears a little bit. Another project that you wrote for was Thirsty Sword Lesbians. Obviously, won a Nebula Award recently, right? That was not long ago.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting. How did you end up involved in that project? How did that come to be?
I think that might have not happened if I wasn't a guest at Big Bad Con 2019. Those were simpler times.
Yeah, right. 2019. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was running. I was like, it was like perfect, and I thank the players. So like, it was Sunday. I was really hungry because I like for the life of me could not find something to eat because I can't unrelated, unimportantly, I was really hungry and I couldn't find anything that was
that's very important
with my diet.
Very
and I was
important.
I was really grumpy, and I'm like, I don't want to run Prism. No one's gonna show up anyway, probably because it's the last day, and other cons like Sundays, like the day where everyone's like, I drank too much last night. I'm not coming to my game.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm just gonna whatever. So I ate a sandwich and I rallied and I went into the room and I think almost just about everybody at the table was at my aquatic content and games panel, and I was like, oh, and they were like, oh, we have tea and trail mix, and I was like, yay, I'm so hungry. That's beside the point. So
I think it's very much to the point, but sorry. Anyway.
Yeah. So I ran Prism and it ended up being like this really cool the scenario I had was like this non-toxic bro chick and her husband were having a baby shower, so to speak, but it was sort of like and then it kind of became like a camping adventure, because first they were hanging out at the house, doing like shotgunning like kegs of beer and hydrating and eating fancy snacks, and then they went on like a camping adventure, and it was really cute. And then they were like, okay, let's order food. And then one of the players, like, who's the designer of Thirsty Sword Lesbians, like, you guys you folks want to play Thirsty Sword Lesbians? And I was like, oh yeah, I kept hearing about that game. I was like, what's Thirsty Sword Lesbians? So I just took it very literally, like, it must be a game about swords and lesbians. I'm guessing. And so we played it, and I was like, oh, and I think I played the Devoted, but I was like, oh, this is a really cool game. And there was a shark character, and I was like, oh, I love sharks. But that's beside the point. And then she reached out to me, and Evil Hat reached out to me, and they're like, you want to like write a scenario for us? And I don't remember if this was before or after Aegon, but that's beside the point. But no, it was definitely before. It was definitely after, because I remember I was talking to Sean. That's beside the point. But because Sean was like, I want you to write a underwater island adventure. I was like, hell yeah, Kraken. That's beside the point. I just really like that scenario. So I wrote a scenario for Thirsty Sword Lesbians that was like, I feel like I like put like sex in like almost everything I write, and I don't know why, because I haven't like gotten laid in years, but that's beside the point. And it doesn't matter, and I don't care. But anyway, so yeah, it's a game. It's a story about paladins that are pole dancers and sex workers, and all the characters are either orcs or apex predators. And I had to look up what animals were apex predators. Turns out some of the animals I thought are not.
Really?
And then I made some animals up to like round it out, because I ran out of apex predators, because it's an Arctic setting. So yeah. So
you say it's like, an Arctic setting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not like Antarctica, Arctic, but
yeah.
Cold setting.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, instead of using swords, they use glaives, so they can like pole dance, whatever. and it's supposed to be about.
Sorry, it's so great. I love that.
Yeah. So, and I was like, yeah, they all banded together because like people were like judging them and thinking they're just all like bloodthirsty killers. They're like, nah, we like cuddling and getting laid too, and we're also not violent. That's just a misconception.
Yeah, it's a mean stereotype about apex predators. Yeah.
Yeah. So because I was like, yeah, you know what I want to write about orcs and humanoid leopard seals fighting each other. Yeah.
What are some Arctic apex predators?
Killer whale and polar. I didn't include polar bear because I feel like polar bear isn't in enough narrative stuff. So killer whales, Arctic wolves. There are other ones that I'm blanking on right now. And there are some things where I'm like, they're not technically Arctic. Like I think I included like mountain lions, but I'm like, it's close. If you Google them, there's pictures of them in the snow. That's good enough. Again, I had to be creative. Like I made like a snow shark.
Is that one?
I don't know. I don't think I included snow leopard because I had leopard seals. So which aren't necessarily. I don't actually.
It makes me think like I probably have no idea what animals are actually apex predators and which ones aren't. I was actually just explaining the idea of an apex predator to my children, like really recently. I don't know. I don't remember what inspired that.
But I think some of the things I did weren't quite apex predator, but they were apex predator. They were on top of the food chain enough.
Yeah.
Where I thought they counted, like. Because I know like killer whales and polar bears are like this.
Okay.
And then I was like, oh man, saltwater crocodiles sound really cool because they're super big, but like that's not an Arctic. So I'm like, it's snow croc. It's an ice croc.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put the word ice in front of it. And
put the word ice in front of it. You're good to go.
Yeah, and a snow shark. Like just it's like street sharks, but it's snow.
I love it. Oh, that sounds really fun. That's cool. It must have been really fun to write for that. I mean, what a wild game to write for in terms of like feeling free to write about just whatever you want to do with it. I don't know. I feel like that's such an interesting game to write for. Was it freeing to be able to like just kind of do whatever it was coming into your imagination?
Yeah, that was definitely me writing stuff as I thought of it, kind of things, because I had the idea, but I was like, I don't know how to like. There are a lot of times where it's like I'll write for a game and I'm like, mechanics, I'll worry about that later. I'm just gonna write the story part first.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was basically me just writing like the narrative. Like there's like three orders. And their leader is a snowy owl, and she lost her partner in a war, and now she's split, and she's like sort of like in a shoujo manga, she's like split into two people, the one that's still grieving and angry, and the one that's like, I have an empire to run. I have no time for crying and for tears. And having and then like making NPCs and have those NPCs having their own backstories and thinking of adventures for them to go on for the scenario. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot.
That's cool. What was it like when you found out about the Nebula Award for Thirsty Sword Lesbians? Was it like pretty wild to be like, wow, I wrote something for a game that won that award, but also like something that has to do with pole dancing? Like, like you wrote something that has to do with pole dancing, and it won a Nebula Award. What was that experience like?
Well, I feel like a noob because I didn't realize the Nebula Award was a big deal. I was like, oh, award, that's cool, yay! But I know at the time, once I realized that it was actually a big deal,
yeah.
I was like, if I went back in time and told myself, hey, Whitney, you're gonna be part of a game where you write about pole dancing paladins, and they'd be like, is cocaine legal in the future?
Yeah, right.
So yeah, that was pretty mind blowing. That like, so it's like, well, here I am. Hi, I'm Whitney. a game that I did a scenario for won a Nebula Award, and my scenario is about pole dancing, sex working snow paladins.
I mean, it's not as if the whole game is not like similar to that, and which is really interesting and cool to me that is the game that, because wasn't, I think that, see, now I'm talking, now I'm not remembering I didn't research this again, but because I think it was the first art, like this is the first year they gave a TTRPG award as part of the Nebula Awards. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
I have no idea. Probably though, because everyone was making a big deal about it, so I assume that's the case. Cause I think it's like a science fiction award thing. So
yeah, so that's what it's famous for being, a famous science fiction award. But I think this was the first time they gave out a TTRPG award, and I just remember that I remember that Wanderer Home was nominated. I remember that Thirsty Sword Lesbians was nominated. I don't remember what else was nominated, but the fact that Thirsty Sword Lesbians is what won, I was like, that is, to me, that's really cool.
We made it.
It's so cool because it's like to win that award, which has a level of being prestigious, and to win it as the first TTRPG to win that award, and to have it be a game that does include themes of sexuality and sex and stuff like that. As somebody that appreciates taking that stuff into account in designing TTRPGs or including in TTRPGs, like, to me that was like a breakthrough moment where I was like, that's really cool. That tells me something. I'm not exactly sure what yet, but it tells me something about the TTRPG scene that to win almost any award that includes those themes. If you had told me 10 years ago, like my version of what you said about cocaine, it's like, if you had told me 10 years ago that games that include any themes of like dating or romance, relationships, sex, intimacy, any of those things, that they would be like winning notable awards in the TTRPG scene in 2022 or whatever, I would have been like, what? You're crazy. Like, there's no way. Like, I don't think I would have believed it, yet here we are, right? I don't know. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. Most of my writing for myself, my own games, or for scenarios for other people's games, most of the time, except for the occasional like thing where it's just like I'm doing it because I want to, like the Curse of Rookwood. That scenario I did, was like a subconscious love letter to being biracial. But almost everything else I wrote was basically like me screaming, "You're not my dad." Like Prism was me screaming, like when someone said I couldn't be a mirror person, I was like, "You're not my dad." Thirsty Sword Lesbians, Three Orders of Ardor was like, paladins, you're usually about prayer and stuff. Like I'm gonna explore sex, So you're not my dad.
Yeah.
And like Aegon wasn't you're not my dad. That was me like, I want to write about the Kraken and have Hecate have sexy shark skeleton pets. I feel like I put like sex in some way, shape, or form in like everything I write. It's just like how important it is and what the theme is about. Because in Curse of Rookwood, it was more about like sex for procreative purposes and less romantic. But everywhere else, it's like, sexy times. I write about death a lot. I write about sex a lot, and I write about some kind of water thing, whether it be like underwater, ocean, snow, beach, anything like that. Those are like my three go-tos.
Yeah. So to kind of like pivot a little bit back towards that idea of safety stuff we were talking about before, one question that kind of comes to my mind is like, do you have any advice for folks? Like, how do you think people should handle, like, let's say you have like a gaming group, right? And you have some people in that gaming group who like really like some of those topics. Like some people who really want some sort of relationships at their table, like whether that's with NPCs or whatever, with their characters as part of their character development. Maybe somebody like wants there to be sexuality in their games, but maybe other people aren't there and they're in the same gaming group. How do people navigate? How do you think people should navigate that? Or do you have advice for how people should navigate that? Or just in general, what your thoughts are about handling that kind of thing at the table?
Yeah. Yeah, a mixed bag is always tricky,
Yeah.
especially when they're not. Well, I mean, see, I like. I feel when it comes to mixed bags, that usually happens, and because I can only speak from my experiences,
Yeah, of course.
with when it's a sprinkling of people you do and don't know. Like if you're running a
Mm.
kind of a game, and like to your friends, like, oh, I heard you were running so and so, and I had to get in, and you get the person that like wanted to play a game, and then you get a couple people that are like, this game sounded cool, so it's like, why not? And you're kind of like, I know these two people, so I know that I can crank it up to 11, but I don't know who these people are at all.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't know that person, and I don't want to like make anyone uncomfortable. And that is when again, I think that's what, like, the X card to me is a good visual reminder, because sometimes I'll just stare at it. I'm like, stop, let's keep going. And, or just remind myself to do check-ins, because sometimes, because me being me, my brain is like a hamster on a spinning hamster wheel, and sometimes my brain, my mouth can't keep up with my brain, and I'm like I'm in way too deep, and I realize that, like, I did body horror without even asking if that was okay with anybody. I'm like,
Yeah.
damn. So yeah, I think the best advice I can give for that kind of experience, because usually when I'm playing games with like people I know, we're all of similar minds. So they're like, oh yeah, I'm cool with that. Yeah, I'm cool with that too. And or like, maybe let's just not do that today. I realized that I have a better answer for this question. So I mentioned this in another thing I was on, where I like it's a lot. It has to do with a lot with expectation.
Yeah.
And I'm finding out more now as an older gamer than I was before. Not that I'm old. And consent. So like, player expectation is important to mention in the beginning, because it's like, what people want at the table. So it's like, I can't know if you want to be in a very intimate romantic relationship unless you tell me.
Yeah.
And if someone else doesn't want that, well, we can cater the experience so everyone sort of gets what they want.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I know, like, why don't we, treat your relationship, anything, sexual, is fade to black, so we don't make anyone uncomfortable. And also consent. So I kind of like comparing it to like ordering a sandwich with somebody else. So I was like, if you and I are ordering a sandwich, and you're like, and I'm like, hey, I really like avocado on my sandwich. You're like, I'm not really crazy about avocado. I'm like, oh yeah, that's okay. We don't have to have avocado on a sandwich. Or I'll be like, you know what? I know I said that I want extra mayo, but this is way too much fucking mayo. Can we like dial back the mayo a little bit? And then another important thing about this sandwich scenario is that you always need to have the opportunity to stop eating. Like, I'm full, I'm done, I don't want to eat anymore, which is like kind of me going into like the whole, like, I want to feel a lot, but I don't want to be miserable afterwards. Like, if I feel a lot, like, there are a lot of times where I'm like on borderline bleed, and that's great. So I'm like, oh man, those feels were so good. Oh, I love it. But then there's like a threshold. Like, I know I feel it, like, physically, when I eat like a little too much. Like, that's like almost like the bleed. Like, I am going to start crying, and I don't know when I'm going to stop. And sometimes I do it to myself, because I'm because I'm bad at communicating when I'm upset. That's beside the point. But yeah, I think the most important thing to do is at the beginning, like, to explain expectations, and to make sure you know what everyone wants on their sandwich ahead of time, and what they don't want. And then to know that it's always okay to change your mind.
Yeah.
And sometimes things come up that you didn't expect, and you're like, oh, okay, let's stop. Let's stop and make sure this is okay. And again, I have slipped up, but like, it's nobody's perfect, and the important thing is that we're all trying.
Right.
And but I think, like, when it comes to like emotional intimacy, like, I feel like it's so powerful and so wonderful, because it's always that really nice experience when, like, you and this is why I like playing with smaller groups, because player spotlight's another important thing, because you want to make sure everyone has room to have their shining moment.
Absolutely.
It's really great when you're like vibing with another character, and you're both having like a really like intense emotional scene, and it doesn't even have to be romantic, it could be platonic. Like, there was this time where I was playtesting Old Cold Bold, and like we were doing a refresh scene, and our characters were at my bakery, or not my bakery, my kitchen setup, because I was a streamer who baked narcotic laced baked goods, and they were like a homebody house husband. And so we were bonding over that. And that was like a really, really cool scene. It had nothing to do with the game. It was just like that moment was just like just so cool. And it wouldn't have happened if we like weren't like like emotionally intensity in sync, because we were like both invested. And that's why I like writing games about like stuff like that, because I like those really intense, like, oh, this is so great, I'm so excited for this thing to be happening moments.
Me too. Yeah, very much. The sandwich analogy is really good. I really like that analogy a lot, because I'm thinking like my experience of this, right, is that I came of age playing role-playing games with groups that were not entirely but mostly like cis males or cis presenting, or male guys, like basically for the most part in the groups I was playing in. And I was the person who was there who was like, I want to include this stuff in my game. I'm the person who's like, I want, what's a good sandwich analogy ingredient for this? I want this on my sandwich. Nothing good is coming. I want mustard on my sandwich. And nobody else wants mustard. But like, that's a good analogy, because like the analogy is such an easily accessible one for people. They get it when it comes to a sandwich. So it's like, all right, you're allowed to like mustard, but if nobody else here wants mustard on their sandwich, you're not going to get mustard on your sandwich.
Right.
And that's a really good analogy for that, because it's like a good reminder that's like, no one's telling you can't like mustard. You can like mustard. You can go have as much mustard as you want, but you just can't have mustard on this sandwich because we're sharing it. And nobody else here wants mustard. And that person's allergic to mustard. So we're not even going anywhere near the mustard. It's such a good analogy. I really like the sandwich analogy.
Yeah, because it's exciting, because it's like with this, like the sandwich analogy, it's like there's a particular gamer I won't necessarily name drop, but like I know whenever we're in a game together, we both know that we could crank up like the uncomfortable factor to 11. So it's like, put as much meat as you want, I can take it.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. So a question I had kind of about the bleed, because we talked about that earlier. This is really a personal question rather than like an advice or a design question, but like, do you personally experience like all bleed when you're playing as being kind of like uncomfortable? Like, do you really just dislike the experience of bleed in general when you're playing, or is it like some kinds of bleed, so depends on the topic, kind of?
Yeah, I mean, the first time, it probably wasn't the first time I bled, but it was the first time that it was really, really difficult. Bleed was the LARP, and I didn't know what bleed was yet. And then it was explained to me. I'm like, well, that makes all the sense in the world. And it was bad timing, because it was at the end of a con, and then it was 4th of July weekend, so it was with my family, and they don't understand like fucking anything about gaming. So I tried to explain to them why I was upset, and they were like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, and that just, made me feel worse, because I felt like a weirdo. And at the time I didn't know why. And I think that's why it hurt me the most, is I didn't know why I was bleeding. But like now, like, years past, I'm like, oh, I was bleeding because at the time I felt lonely, and I had no idea how relationships work. And it was really exciting. And during the game, it was like really, really intimate. Like, oh, I want more of this. And then it was suddenly over. And I was like, no, I want more sandwich. Don't take the plate away from me. And then, here and there bleed happened, but it was more like it wasn't necessarily a lack of something. It was like just so much of something. Like I played Here's My Power Button. There was just so much feels. There was like just a bunch of feels afterwards. So I was like, oh, I had too much sandwich. Oh my God. So the first time was not enough sandwich. This was too much. And now most of the time when I feel bleed, I can I know what my things are. So like I'll especially with COVID, because before it would usually be at a con and be like, oh, Whitney's sad because XYZ, because we're elder queers and we know why Whitney's sad, because we know Whitney and we know what happens in this game. But like during COVID, I would be like alone, and I had to be like, why am I bleeding? And I'd be like, oh, that's why, because this world is wonderful, and right now my life is shit, and I'm broke. And in this game, I have a wife, I have money, I can be nice to people, because, and then I want to get to that point real quick.
Yeah.
After I'm done
Sure.
this sentence. But and then I like had like I'm like right on the edge of bleed. I'm like, oh, I know I'm probably like bleed is imminent, but I'm going to stop eating because I know if I eat one more bite, I'm going to hit that threshold I was talking about earlier. But no, now I forgot my point.
Oh, you were saying about during COVID being nice and like,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
So like Powered by the Apocalypse, my favorite playbook ever, is like out of all the games, is for some reason still the Faceless in Apocalypse World, because one, because there's a +1 hot option and the Gunlugger doesn't have that, but it's like, it's the tank. It's like all you have to, if anyone who's played the game, all you have to do is say is Rasputin, and people are like, yes, the game, the move where you just keep going no matter how many times you get capped. I'm like, yes, I want this violence in my life. But it's like I want like the violence with a purpose, not like the quote unquote murder hoboing. It's like, oh my God, they tried to shoot my boyfriend. I'm going to forcibly remove their spine now. But like I usually, when it comes to like playbooks or characters, I tend to be like the kind of like the aggro character, like in Monster Hearts, I like the werewolf. But when I play a game by myself, I know I always like, despite those moments of violence, even with other people, I like choosing the non-violent options. There's another reason why I wrote Prism, because like I say the rules that it's a high conflict game, not a high combat game. Is that so? It's like I was playing a choose your own adventure based on Robin Hood called Knocked, and what I love about that game is that you can choose to like be like, we're not going to rob them, or I'm not going to cut this guy's head off because I choose mercy, and the game doesn't punish you. Like sometimes it does, but it's kind of like, the instant gratification versus rewarding you later, like harvesting the sisters or saving them in BioShock. So it's like I feel like deep down I want those options where it's like I want to not be the nice person, but just sometimes I just want to choose mercy. So it's like, while I say I love the Faceless playbook and I love being like, I'm going to smash through this wall like the Kool-Aid man, I also like my character likes the children in the community, and when they scavenge, they find them little toys, like those little trinkety things you got in those quarter machines. So it's just like, I like murder, but I also like kindness. But that, I don't know if that has to do with anything we were talking about.
No, it does. I mean, I don't know. It definitely, yeah. Well, I am curious as to, how you, what made you, or how did you know you, that's not, oh man. I'm used to asking lots of these questions on the show. I feel like maybe it's multiple streams in one day and I'm fogged brain. I don't know. But what I'm trying to ask about is conflict resolution. And you mentioned that it's like a, low combat, high conflict game. I'm curious, like, what made you want to, like, what led you to want to do conflict resolution in different ways besides violence, and present like different methods of conflict resolution besides violence in Prism?
Yeah. Well, I think that was also partial because of D&D and Pathfinder, because people will say, "Oh, it's because you're a dungeon master," blah 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 blah. I don't care, because the fact of the matter is, your master dungeon master is not the person running my game, the game I am in.
Yeah.
And it'll be like, what's that thing in 5th edition? Inspiration.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. They almost never use inspiration. The only times you get experience points is through combat. I can talk to a dragon, but I still have to kill it. So what's the point of talking to the dragon? And then, like in Pathfinder, the alignments were super serious business. And I'm like, the kobolds did something wrong. I'm like, they didn't do anything wrong in their eyes. It's just their culture. Like, no, they did something bad to us, so we're gonna kill them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't like that. There's no me gusta.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted the opportunity to, like, again, Prism was making a game I want to play. It's like, I want to play a game where it's like, I mean, I like being a Faceless and I like being a werewolf, but at the same time, I want to be like, there's a ghost that's murdering people, but there's probably a reason why it's doing that. Let's my first high test at Metatopia, my first Metatopia, the two players knew what my game was supposed to do before I did. And I had this character that was attacking the tourists, and the previous players were like, "Oh, we have to get rid of that person because they're bad and they're killing people." But the two high testers were like, "Oh, what happened? We should talk to them. There must be like a misunderstanding or something." And it turns out there was, but I'm like, yeah, it's just like not every solution to every problem should be stabbing it in the face. I mean, by all means, like if you want to set someone on fire, as long as everybody's okay with that, have at it. But I like the option of being like, let's use something. When games have diplomacy, and diplomacy either A, doesn't work most of the time, or B, is trumped by the person that's aggro. It's like, I haven't made this comparison in a while, but like, have you seen The Godfather?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's like you have Sonny and you have Tom. So Sonny is hot-headed. He's sort of the head of the family when the father gets shot, and then you have Tom, who is like the negotiator. As long as Sonny exists, Tom has no power.
Yeah.
So unless you mechanically give Tom an edge in the game, if this was a game, there's nothing for Tom to do because Sonny will always win.
Right.
So I played a game where that happened. I'm like, this is stupid. What's the point of being the negotiating type if the person who's aggro has all the cards in this game?
Right.
So again, making a Prison a game I want to play.
Yeah.
So and I've done that with Old Cold Bull, because like the Cold is the negotiator, but he's also they are also the one with all the money. So it's like, if I can't win you with words, I will win you with cash.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm
just really interested in like exploring more like games that present. The reasons you just gave are resonate with my own experience too, because I've definitely been that person who built a really charismatic like character in like a traditional D&D game and wanted to like explore ways other than just stabbing somebody in the face to like overcome scenarios, and being frustrated that like, why did I build this character when it clearly does not fit this game? And that's another thing you can really work out with that sandwich in that session 0 or that tea party, as you said, when you're like working out your like player expectations and all that stuff, and that's great. But beyond that too, I definitely am just really interested in like games that explore alternate, like I have like ethical and theological interest in like exploring games that show conflict resolution beyond violence, because I like playing violent games. I play violent video games. I play violent ttrpgs all the time, but like I really am interested in games that like use different ways of resolving conflict, because like I feel like in some ways we're starved for that in our society. Like we see situations resolved through violence so often, to the point where we're like numb to violence, and just I see that kind of trickle down to like just the way people resolve conflict in their daily lives, like people taking the most, maybe not literally violent like in the physical sense of like punching someone or shooting someone or stabbing someone, but like taking the more violent route when it's like there are lots of other ways of resolving that conflict besides like the most violent way. So yeah, I'm just intrigued by that in game design, and I feel like we're probably just scratching the surface in the hobby of like designing games that resolve conflict in different ways besides violence. I know there's like a good amount of them now compared to what there was, but I still feel like we're probably just scratching the surface of it. So anyway, again, not a question, but it's just but it's cool that you wanted to design Prism like that way. It's really intriguing to me. Well, so maybe that's a good place for us to kind of wrap the conversation, actually. And why don't you tell people, like, my last question is usually, and you already kind of answered it, my last question is usually, what do you have up next? Like, what are you working on? What's your next thing?
Yeah. So my next thing, I'm still working on it now. Still working on the artwork and promotional material, and I'm like dreading the editing phase. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm working on the Lady Blackbird hack, Lady Blackbird by John Harper. Um, the Old, the Cold, the Bold, which is a criminal gig economy game where it's like, what if crimes were on an app like Uber? um, that can be run. It's up to 3 players and a game master, or and it can also be run on one, or 2 players. It's very mix and match. I do not know when that's coming out yet because
Sure.
again,
Yeah.
it's a pet project more than anything
Yeah.
because I love Lady Blackbird so much. Um, and that was another game that experienced of what I want in a game. But that's for another conversation for another time.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what I'm working on right now. Because now that the second print run of Prism is over, I'm focusing on my pet project right now.
Cool. And where can people find you out there in the internet land, or buy physical copies of Prism, or any of those things?
They can find physical copies of Prism on Drive-Thru RPG, Indie Press Revolution. You can also find links to these on my personal portfolio, Little Wish Productions. And you can find me on Twitter at Whittle Dragon, WIDDLE Dragon. And maybe one day you'll find me at cons if the cons I go to become face to face ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was actually thinking, like, oh yeah, people are probably either heading to Gen Con right now or in getting ready for Gen Con. Maybe they can pick up a physical copy of Prism.
Yes, yes, because it'll be at it'll be at the IPR booth.
Awesome. Well, if anybody who's watching this was going to be at Gen Con, go grab a copy of Prism in the second printing. What are you waiting for? Go grab it, quick. Go find it at Gen Con and grab it. Whitney, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so grateful we were able to make it work out and get you on here.
Thank you. It was a joy and a pleasure to be here today.
Awesome, thanks. Well, I'm gonna ask Whitney to hang out here in my so-called digital green room, and we're gonna wrap the show up. So I'm gonna switch back up to my cocktail recipe screen there. Folks can check out that cocktail recipe one last time as we wrap up the show. As I said, huge thanks to our guest, Whitney Delaglio, for coming on the show. I'm very grateful. And you should all definitely pick up a copy of Prism and check out Little Wish online and all that. And all that information will be in the show notes. So if you're watching this after the fact, it's there. You can check it out. And hey, if you're watching this on Twitch, don't forget to hit the follow button, or you consider subscribing to the channel. We did have somebody named MC Wallace subscribe during the show tonight. That person may or may not be married to me, so that's kind of more of a gesture, I think, but a deeply appreciated one. But yeah, you also can subscribe to the channel on Twitch. If you only caught part of tonight's show, you'll be able to watch it on demand for a brief time here on Twitch. But you can also go to allportsopen.com, where you can watch every episode of the show after the fact. You can also check us out on YouTube. And if you go to YouTube, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and subscribe to Holy Happy Hour Batman channel on YouTube. I would love to bring up those YouTube numbers a little bit, so it would be great if you could share it that way or subscribe there so you get notified when we go live. Like right now, we're live on YouTube, or so you can catch episodes after the fact if you missed them. Huge thanks to Joshua Wise, my APON co-founder, for the artwork on my stream that you see here and for everything he does for our network. Thanks to Doctor Octoroc for the use of his music on the show. And yes, and my campaign for Broken is still alive. Make sure you go to bit.ly/brokengame. We are less than $150 away from funding the stretch goal for Broken and bringing 6 other game designers on that game, and I would absolutely love it if you would check out that campaign. So, all right, I have been That Gamer Priest Ben. Come back next week, same bat time, same bat channel, as we are joined by a friend of the show, Spencer Campbell, who's going to be coming on to talk about his next game coming to Kickstarter called Rune, which is a Souls-like solo TTRPG game that's really cool. It's a really cool game. So Spencer's coming back on the show next week. So again, join us next Monday night. Until then, I hope you have the holiest and happiest of hours, my friends. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you really soon.
citizens of Halcyon City, the newest generation of heroes are now painting the pages of Delinquent Comics, a Masks new generation actual play podcast. Complete back issues are available now on allportsopen.com, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever podcasts are found. You can help join the fight and hear the newest releases early by becoming a supporter on Patreon at patreon.com/allportsopen. New bi-weekly episodes become available to all citizens on May 24th, featuring the newest arc, the Sunset Island Saga.